10, 9, 8. We have a go for engine start.
Actually born and raised in Miami, Florida, and was always interested in STEM-related subjects as a youngster. We didn't use the word STEM back then, but I always liked technology and science and things like that. I was the kind of kid that played with batteries and light bulbs and motors and so on. As a kid growing up, I liked space movies and airplane movies, but I never thought it was a reality. I watched them on TV, didn't think I could do it. Graduating from high school, went to Florida State University as a music student, go Noles, and Florida State University introduced me to engineering. So I began taking engineering courses as well as music. I was actually doing a dual major. Graduating from college, went into Naval Aviation Officer Candidate School, became a naval aviator, flew for the Navy for a while. They sent me back to school, finished my master's in aerospace engineering, flew for the Navy some more, became an aerospace engineering duty officer, as they call it, flew testing evaluation flights for the Navy, then selected by NASA for astronaut training.
3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Endeavour in pursuit of a Japanese satellite.
I'm Winston Scott, retired U.S. Navy captain. I spent 27 years on active duty as a naval aviator, 7 as a NASA astronaut, 2 space shuttle missions, 9 days on Endeavour, 16 days on Columbia.
And next to him here is Winston Scott, who will be also doing the EVA during the flight, along with Takao Doi.
It was not always the plan to go into the military. Again, when I graduated from FSU, I was looking for a way to continue my engineering education, and I reasoned that the military would send me to school. Vietnam War was still going on, so people were ducking and dodging the military, but for me, it felt like it was the right thing I was supposed to pursue. And I did. I pursued the Air Force and pursued the Navy, naval aviation. The Navy responded first. I entered Naval Aviation Officer Candidate School. So that's really kind of how that happened. I had no experience or no guidance in going into the military. I asked myself, if I go in, what will I do? And then answered myself by saying, well, airplanes are cool. Maybe I'll be a pilot. I only been on an airliner a couple of times in my life, never been in the cockpit of an airliner, but passed the entrance exams. And the entrance exams are pretty heavy for people like me who just wandering off the streets. I didn't have a ROTC. I didn't have the Naval Academy. I'm just wandering off the streets and said, tell me about the flight program. So they gave me this long battery of tests, and I did well on those. They sent my name in, and I was accepted in the Naval Aviation Officer Candidate School. And that's how it started. The Navy trains everybody in fixed-wing airplanes. Then some of us get to helicopter training, which I did. So my first duty station was flying anti-submarine warfare helicopters off of destroyers. It was called the LAMPS program, Light Airborne Multi-Purpose System. So I did that for 4 years, went to graduate school, completed a master's degree in engineering, then went through fixed-wing training again, and this time assigned to a fighter squadron flying the F-14 Tomcat. So I was in the Oceana, Virginia, flying F-14s. For people who don't know the F-14, it's the original Top Gun airplane that was in the movie back in the 80s with Tom Cruise. Following that tour of duty, I became an aerospace engineering officer, and I flew the A-7, flew the F-18, flew the F-14 again, flew the T-2A4, and then after that is my time at NASA. So overall, I have over 8,000 hours of flight time in more than 25 different airplanes, a rotary wing, fixed wing. Everybody that applies to NASA does so on their own. NASA doesn't really go out and recruit specific people. They advertise when they're going to select astronauts, and they advertise the requirements because they want many people to apply, and literally thousands do apply. So I did apply, and of course, because I was a naval aviator, I had to apply to the Navy first, get past the Navy board. The entire process took about a year and a half. So I applied to the Navy, and then a year and a half later, I was one of 19 Americans selected for the Space Shuttle program. When you're an astronaut, those of us who are active duty remain with our active duty service. Those who are Air Force, Main Air Force, Navy, and so on. That's why a lot of astronauts are Colonel Smith, Major Brown, Commander whatever, or Captain something. Because the active duty people remain with their active duty service. You're just given orders to go down to NASA at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Endeavour was my first flight, so I spent 9 days on Endeavour. There were 6 people on the crew. We were preparing to build the International Space Station in those days, so we were doing a lot of engineering work, testing tools, equipment, techniques to build the International Space Station. I had two primary jobs. I was mission specialist too, which is similar to a flight engineer in the civilian world. So I was part of the flight deck crew that actually operated the vehicle. But my main job was spacewalking. So I was an EVA, and I performed my first spacewalk on that mission. It was 6 hours and 50-something minutes, as I recall. One of the more important things that was accomplished during that mission, I tested improvements to the spacesuit itself. The space station was going to be built in super cold environment in space. NASA modified the suit to handle those cold temperatures, and I tested the suit's function, and it worked really well. My second flight 2 years later was on Columbia, 16 days on Columbia. Again, I was the flight engineer for that flight, and then performed two spacewalks on that one. So again, we tested tools, equipment, techniques that astronauts would later use to construct the International Space Station. One of my spacewalks was interesting because my buddy and I conducted a manual retrieval of a satellite. This satellite had malfunctioned and developed a slow turn, a slow spin in space. And because it was spinning, we couldn't catch it with the robot arm. So my buddy and I, on our first spacewalk, did a manual capture on that satellite. Really interesting, life-changing event, catching a 3,000-pound satellite in space. My training in the Navy prepared me well for the next step as an aviator going to the space program. I would say serving in the military, in my case it was the Navy, but it could be any branch, was the smartest thing I ever did. You used to hear the commercials saying that either be all you can be or aim high or you do more in one day than more. That's true. I've done things in my life that I never would have had the opportunity to do had I not gone into the military. For me, it was the smartest, best thing I ever did, and I don't regret 1 second of it.